Hi, this is Bruce from the Weather Report, and I would like to do a preface to the upcoming podcast that we are presenting to you tonight. It has sensitive material in it, and we might be scratching the surface on stuff that, frankly, young people probably should not listen to. So if you've got any young people in your room right now and you're watching this, perhaps you might want to send them to the game room or something else like that. But we're going to be talking about the Jerry Sandusky case, and Jerry Sandusky was a coach underneath Penn State's head coach, Joe Paterno. And in 2011, Jerry Sandusky was accused of some heinous crimes against children, children molestation, basic sexual acts, things like that. He was subsequently sentenced to prison for 30 to 60 years, and he is currently serving that sentence out in a prison in Pennsylvania. So what I wanted to say is number one, this is sensitive material. It's not for everybody. And if you don't have an open mind to the verdict that was outright said from the grand jury all the way to the trial, you might not want to watch this anyway. But what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to open people's minds and have them take a look at what exactly happened through the trial. We're just going to scratch the surface of this incident with Jerry Sandusky, and we're probably going to have other episodes to follow, just to keep things fresh and also keep the information that we have available to everybody who really wants to scrutinize what happened to Jerry Sandusky. I'm not saying that Sandusky isn't guilty. I'm not saying that he isn't innocent, but there is information out there that is contrary to what happened in the trial. And I ask you to keep an open mind throughout this podcast. Thank you.
Here's another reason why you want to take control of what you're doing.
Everything kind of funnels into the only winning move is not to play the game.
So I got to ask permission to buy the gun, and then I got to pay to ask permission to carry the motherfucker outside of my house. How about you go fuck yourself?
And I am the only tan guy in the room, and my other two co-hosts are red, like the red men in the Midwest. And I want to welcome you guys to the Weather Report. Thank you guys for being here. Thank everybody that's in the live stream right now. Thank everybody who's going to be listening to us on the audio stream that's going to come in on tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock on your favorite podcatchers. We've been having a great turnout to these live streams, and I just really want to thank everybody for being here. It really means a lot to me and the rest of the co-hosts that you guys are here. How you guys doing today, guys? You guys have been busy all weekend. I've been busy all weekend. Just kind of tell us in a couple of words what you guys have been doing, because I know you hang out.
Outside. We have been outside. So this is I'm from Wisconsin white, and he Jason is of course Minnesota white. And we went to we were at a car show today, and it was a beautiful 82 degrees, sunny, very little humidity, just a very slight breeze. The kind of day you don't even notice you're burning to a crisp. And
Like me.
And that's what we both did too. So it's I was in makeup for 2 hours just to look like this,
Well, yeah, and I was getting my hair done for the last 4 hours. I mean, it took forever, but
it came out good. I mean, whoever you got doing it, it's working for you, my man.
I was blow drying
I need a number
forever,
two.
and it just, oh my God, the amount of blow drying and product I have to put in my hair is just insane. But
you said you weren't going to get burnt like that again.
I know, but so I say I'm not going to get burnt like this, but that means I'm going to.
You should be tanning already.
Yeah.
You have a lack of you have a lack of, what is it called? Melanin? Yeah, melanin.
Yeah, melanin. I've got Irish in me, so I just
You
burn.
you don't have any melanin. I have Irish in me, and I have lots of melanin.
Well, I've got more Irish. I've got about half of me is Irish and Finnish.
I thought you were 100% Russian mob.
No,
which is also a good burner,
Yeah, no.
Well, like I said, let's get serious. I've been working in my backyard all weekend. It's been 100 degrees plus outside. So, I mean, I've just been in and out. I'll work for about 20-30 minutes to come back in, sit in front of the fan and just swallow water all day and stuff like that. But the backyard's coming along, garden's looking great. I got lots of content to put out there on the Weathered Soul website. So if you guys want to go over there to weatheredsoul.com, you can check out all the new information I got on my garden and how I've been successful and how I've been just banging my head against the wall.
Well,
but anyway,
in our world of just trying to make our own ways in life, and that's a lot what Jason and I were doing today at this car show. You know, I sell art as an artist, so I set up a tent. I got prints and originals there, and Jason brought up a bunch of his swag because he makes all the swag for me too. And it's just a chance to network with people and talk and do that. So if you're looking for art or some cool swag, you can go to madcasestudio.com, or if you're looking for some politically incorrect things to piss off everybody else in your life, that's on the right, left, or center. Jason will have something for you on that, and that's at horribledesigns.com. So be sure to check that out too.
And Bruce, the reason why you're banging your head about your garden is because you're not growing bacon. That's why you need to be going through.
Yeah. We've got bacon farms everywhere out here in the Midwest.
I don't want to disappoint Harkos, as Harkos is so dead set against bacon. It's just not even funny anymore.
Well, we should really send him some bacon wrapped bacon fried in bacon grease.
There's an intervention coming. It's a bacon intervention.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, without further ado, we're going to talk about some sensitive subjects tonight. Everybody knows, if they watch the weather report and listen to the X Spaces in the morning, that we don't have a high regard for pedophiles, child molesters, and stuff like that. We're really serious about that, but also at the same time, we also have open minds. So not everybody that goes to trial is actually, put through a nice, fair trial. It's nice to know that we have a justice system that balances out, but the reality is that sometimes you can get railroaded into some situations that honestly you cannot control. But what we're going to be talking about today is about the Penn State coach Jerry Sandusky, who served underneath Joe Paterno in 2011 and before, and he was sent to prison for 30 to 60 years on a various amount of charges that had to do with the sexual nature of children. And John Odermatt of the Lions of Liberty has a great podcast out called I'm losing my mind here.
You're also losing your mic.
Yeah.
Finally. Do I have my mic on now?
There you go. Talk right into it, sir.
Anyway, so we have John Odermatt on tonight, and he's got a series of podcasts out that deal with the evidence and some of the stuff that has been brought to light since Jerry Sandusky's conviction and his subsequent prison sentence. I'm going to bring him on right now. Why don't you welcome, guys, John Odermatt from the Fighting Freedom podcast and Lions of Liberty. How you doing, John?
Good to see you, man.
Back.
Yeah, you still got that mustache.
I still do. I'm trying to become a state trooper, but they won't let libertarians become state troopers. It's really hard to crack.
That's messed up.
What a way to start a podcast, but
yeah.
John, how you been doing, man? I've been good. I mean, it's been a rocky, couple weeks for me, as you know, Bruce, getting laid off from my job 3 weeks ago. But like you guys, I am going to take a venture down a crack at full-time entrepreneurship. So
yeah, absolutely
excited. Well, not like Bruce. Bruce still has a foot in the corporate world. So
we all do. We're
on wood that I still have.
Oh, you all do. You all have some toes dangling in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway,
except for Harkos.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to scratch on some of that you're going through in the bonus content second hour that we do the podcast. But mainly we're here because the interest that I have over the Jerry Sandusky case, and it really prompted me from the one podcast that you had from Frank, the Frank Report. And I listen and I read the Frank Report on X a lot, and he's got a lot of good investigative reporting going on. And he wanted Jerry Sandusky's innocence to go viral, and you did a podcast on it. And it kind of hit me then. And that's when I started going back. And I've listened to all your podcasts about Jerry Sandusky, and it's just a really, really interesting case. One that took center stage when ESPN first dropped the news that he was being investigated, and it wasn't too long after that the whole mountain fell down upon the Penn State football program and the athletic department. And I would just like to hear your story and how you got involved in this on the first place, other than the fact that you are an alumni of Penn State. So why don't we come from the beginning on where you stood on this?
Yeah. And I think me being an alumni probably has less to do with it than you would think. I would say most Penn State alumni probably, fall in the category where they completely believe the narrative as it is, and definitely don't. Many question Joe Paterno's involvement, that aspect of it. But very few that I've met actually, start to question, the charges and, the conviction against Jerry Sandusky. But so my involvement, I did go to Penn State. So when this thing came down in November of 2011, it was during a bye week that it occurred. So a very, very dead time in the Penn State football season. And the grand jury report was leaked. And, for those of you that know anything about grand jury reports, they're one side. It's the prosecution's fairy tale of everything that they can throw at the wall to get whatever they can get to stick. So when this thing dropped in November of 2011, I really didn't know a lot about Jerry Sandusky. So I attended Penn State from 2001 to 2006, and Jerry Sandusky retired as the defensive coordinator at Penn State in 1999. So I remember watching Penn State before I went to school, very little about seeing him on the sidelines, but he wasn't someone who had been involved with the program at all since 99. But I was obviously shocked by it at the time, and I'll admit that I believed pretty much everything at face value, and really didn't question any of it. I did question, of course, I did start to question it when they fired Joe Paterno. And the way that went down was pretty insane. This is a guy, Joe Paterno, that coached at Penn State for, I think he started in the 60s, but obviously holds the record for all-time NCAA AA football wins.
He was like the Tom Landry of the Cowboys. So
yeah. 409 career wins. Many would say one of the greatest college football coaches of all time. And the way that he was fired just by a phone call coming in the middle of the night from the board of trustees. Essentially he gets a phone call, says, call this. No, someone comes and knocks on his door, hands him a note card, says, call this number. He calls the number. And at that point in time, he was fired by the acting chairman of the board of trustees, who I'm blanking on his name. It'll come to me. It's an important name. The guy was the head of U.S. Steel at the time, I believe. But it was a crazy time, and there were riots in the streets at Penn State when Joe Paterno was fired. They didn't allow him to have a press conference. Before he was fired, he had released a statement that his son, Scott Paterno, wrote, who I have come to find out is a complete buffoon. But essentially the statement said, these are abhorrent accusations. And, with the benefit of hindsight, I wish I'd done more. And essentially by writing that and signing that, it was interpreted that he was saying, I knew what was happening and I wish I'd done more to stop it, which there's no truth to that at all whatsoever. And we'll get more, into this down the road, that he didn't know what was happening because nothing had happened. But that was what the media took from it. And when that happened around the same time, so Paterno's fired. So the way it works in Pennsylvania, maybe this is different in different states, but the governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett, so the governor serves on the Penn State Board of Trustees as a state university. So there was pressure from Corbett to fire Paterno, and Corbett, before he was elected governor, was attorney general in Pennsylvania and did have a lot to do with bringing these charges and the investigation against Sandusky. So there's a lot of political elements to this case, but it's not really like a typical political case where you would say like this side did this, for X reason. It's sort of everyone acting on their own incentives. Even, recently, more recently, in 20, I think 16 or 17, even Josh Shapiro, the current governor of Pennsylvania, before he was governor, when he was attorney general, he gets involved in trying to benefit off of looking tough against the Sandusky case. So it's not Republican or Democrat. It's kind of all sides. But so what poured gasoline on this case was the Joe Paterno element. If there was not a Joe Paterno connection, I don't think this even would have been a headline in a newspaper. I don't think anybody would have cared about it. But when Joe Paterno was fired, like you said, Bruce, ESPN descended on State College, Pennsylvania. They were camped out in front of Paterno's house and all over campus. And it became, before there was ever a trial, before there was ever any testimony, the assumption was he's 100% guilty. And I'll admit, I bought into it at the time, thinking that Sandusky was 100% guilty of everything. And I can keep going, but I'm honestly curious to get some feedback from you guys, because it can kind of help me to get your experience from it.
Yeah, I remember when it dropped, and I wasn't really heavy I guess I was heavy into sports, but I wasn't really heavy into college football at that time. Since then, I'm an LSU fan, stuff like that. So, but I remember when that dropped, and I'm in the same boat with you. I mean, when it really comes down to it, and there's all these accusations flying around, and the media at that time in 2011, I was kind of hooked into the media. I was a big Fox guy at that time. I was in the middle of whether I was going to be a libertarian, whether I was going to be a conservative, what I was going to do, whatever it was, what place I was in. I also had a podcast at a time, and I really didn't do any podcasts on Jerry Sandusky, because at that time I wasn't involved with my cohorts that we have right now, that we all have our views on what's going on in this world and what's happening in today's world. So I was brought back by it. I thought, like the media is telling the truth and all this other stuff. And the grand jury came up to its indictment, and the trial went on, and I never thought two shakes of it. And when he got, convicted and sentenced to his prison sentence, I thought it was said and done. And it was sad that Joe Paterno, I was really surprised about the Joe Paterno incident, and subsequently he died not too much longer after he got fired. So I mean, it was just really
this happened in November. He died in January.
Yeah, it was really a snowball after that. So that's how it affected me. So I'll let Ken and Jason kind of chime in on how they felt about it.
I remember watching about it and things like that. And just like you guys, I bought into it. And in fact, all the way up to last Thursday night, talking to Bruce, saying, I don't know if I want to even talk about this subject. I don't think that there's any, this is open and shut, my brother. And Bruce says, you need to listen to this episode that John did with AJ Dillon. And I did, because, I try to have an open mind, not about child molestation or any of that, or abuse of power or any of that kind of stuff. I don't deal with that at all. I have zero tolerance for that. But I have been sued in the past on a completely, basically frivolous suit that I can't even talk about. But I know that everything isn't the way it seems. And so listening to that and that interview you did with him, John, was absolutely fantastic. It really opened my eyes to, okay, here's a guy that went in there and said, yeah, he went in as a
fake accuser.
As a fake accuser. Yeah. And so if you haven't listened to the episode, we'll put a link into it in the show.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was eye-opening, and I'm trying to get some work done, and I figured I'd listen to it while I'm working. I kept stopping and just staring. I mean, I got it on my little Bluetooth speaker. I'm just staring at the speaker, just hanging on every word. It was it changed my mind of what could be. I still have the questions of the why. Why did they want to railroad this guy so bad?
So we can get to that, but let's hear from everybody, and then
absolutely
go, Jason.
Of course, now I have something that you guys give me something time to say something. I really have nothing to say finally. Of course. Well, after hearing about the whole thing, I wanted to throw the guy into the wood chipper, just like every other pedophile and whatnot. Damn, I said it again. But I need to listen to that episode that Bruce sent. I haven't got a chance to just because my day job has been so overwhelming lately that I haven't had a chance to listen to it. But I'm going to. And if Ken was moved by it, knowing information about Ken that I do, if Ken was moved by it, then I think that it's possible that what has been said could be true, that maybe he is. But I'm kind of going along the line of Ken of why do they want to? I mean, was he the scapegoat for everything, or what? Why did they want to railroad him?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I guess to answer the question, and then we'll get more into it. But it's not that they wanted to railroad Jerry Sandusky. I will say I think there was an element of railroading Joe Paterno from the media, because the media hated Joe Paterno. Joe Paterno was a conservative, dealing with a very liberal media, and they always hated him. And he ran a program, Success with Honor. We're going to graduate our students, but yet we're also going to win. And it was a squeaky clean program. And when the media had a chance to pounce on him, they went with it with all the fury that they could muster.
And those are the Obama years too. So you had Jesus the second coming in office to half the country.
Yeah,
that's correct. So John, so the first thing that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your first inkling with the podcast on the Joe Paterno incidents was when you posted the "With benefit of hindsight, John Ziegler takes down Sandusky and the Paterno scandal." I'm not sure if that's the first one, but that's the first one that I got on your search on the webpage. And that was on May 4th. There might be one that's before that, but what actually prompted you to start doing podcast investigative work? Was it John Ziegler himself, or was it something else that you came across?
Yeah, it was John Ziegler, and the first one, I don't have it, the date's not showing, but it was actually the 8th episode that I did of Felony Friday. So very early in my podcasting
way back
tenure.
In Friday days. Okay.
So what happened was I was just watching YouTube, as you do, going down whatever YouTube rabbit hole would find me. And I stumbled upon a video from John Ziegler talking about this Jerry Sandusky, Joe Paterno, the whole scandal. And it just, and at the time that I was watching it, Ziegler was very focused on vindicating Joe Paterno from any wrongdoing. Hence the name of his website that he has, where it has literally lists of every interview he's done, every article that's been written, that he's written about this case at framingpaterno.com. But it just really opened my eyes. And I watched like 5 or 6 videos of Ziegler talking about different aspects of this case, looking into the lives of each of these accusers. Particularly what really piqued my interest was, so victim number 2, which everyone knows, who knows anything about this case as the shower incident. That's the one, that really went viral. That's the one that the prosecution cited in the grand jury report as being anal rape in a shower with an eyewitness. And when you hear that, you're like, oh my God, it had to have happened. Right. There was an eyewitness who witnessed anal rape of a child. I mean, that's open and shut case, right? But when you start to look into all these different pieces, and just background on the players here. So Mike McQuarrie at the time was a graduate assistant at Penn State well, actually, it's even confusing when you start listing the date of the shower incident. That's one of the parts that gets crazy. I'll get to that in a minute. We'll say at the time of the shower incident, he was a graduate assistant. In 2011, he was assistant offensive coordinator for Penn State when this happened, or when the prosecution dropped the grand jury report. But when you start looking into this shower incident, there's a lot of pieces that don't fit together. For one, this incident was investigated by a federal agent who was reanalyzing or looking at again a security clearance for the former president of Penn State at the time, Graham Spanier. So this incident was investigated by the federal government with a security lens on it, and was found that no crime occurred, that there was no incident that occurred. That was the findings of the federal report, which I can send you a link to if you want that.
Can we stop right there for a second? Because that's something I never heard. Was that something that was presented? I mean, was that the press even mention that ever? That there was an independent investigation that found no wrongdoing?
No. And part of the problem was that why things like this and things like Jerry Sandusky's medical records were not brought forward at trial, because Jerry Sandusky hired one of his friends who was a local state college DUI attorney, Joe Amendola. Nice enough guy, but not at all cut out for the magnitude of this case. And honestly, got very caught up in, this is my moment to become a celebrity lawyer. Mm-hmm. And if you remember when he brought, it was supposed to be Joe Amendola talking to Bob Costas. People probably remember this interview. Yeah. And right before they went live, Joe says, "Oh, do you want me to see if we can get Jerry to call in?" And of course, Bob Costas is like, "Yes." Like, why would I turn that down? So Joe Amendola didn't even prep his client at all for anything before bringing him on, and brings in Jerry Sandusky, who is a very slow person, to say it in a nice way. So, and you'll hear this if you listen to any other interviews where Jerry Sandusky's been interviewed. I know John Ziegler interviewed him in prison. When you ask Jerry Sandusky a question, he asks the question back to himself before answering it. So so when he was asked by Bob Costas, I forget exactly what the wording was, something like, "Are you sexually attracted to minors," or something like that. And he said, "Am I sexually attracted to minors?" So instead of just saying no outright, which actually he had said no in answering the previous question, but Bob Costas, because Bob Costas is a good journalist, followed up again with a second question. But it just, between Joe Paterno getting fired and that interview, everyone had seen all that they needed to see to convict Jerry Sandusky, throw him in a wood chipper. Me at the time too. That was my thinking. But when you look at this case, you look at the lawyer Joe Amendola, who's a local DUI lawyer, overmatched, only having 7 months to prepare for this case. Any postponement or anything that was requested was shut down by the judge. And I think really the reason for that was they needed to get through this case before the next football season, because it's crazy, like all the different incentives with this, because they needed to be able to bring some sort of sanctions against Penn State, and Penn State had these upside down incentives that they needed to prove that these accusations were true, and they also needed to prove that they were going to be, really, really hard on them. And they also needed to prove that they were willing to pay a bunch of money to people in order to come out, looking like, yes, we really, really care about what happened here. But to come back to the shower incident, because this piece of evidence is just crucial. So the original date that was given to the prosecution of the shower incident was March 9th, 2002. That date was wrong. Eventually, emails that they found, on Penn State talking about the meeting between Paterno and McQuarrie, not sent by Paterno because Paterno never had an email account, but between Paterno and his superior, Tim Curley, the athletic director, or I guess Tim Curley to Graham Spanier talking about the meeting that Paterno had told him about. Anyway, the date on those emails showed the meeting to be February 10th, 2001. So when the prosecution gets this, they think, okay, so the meeting was February 10th. That must mean the shower incident was February 9th. And this was believed through the trial. And really, I don't think John Ziegler figured out the correct date until 2018. So 7 years later, Ziegler figured out that this initial date was wrong. Just by going through and looking at, some evidence, some scheduling happening around those dates. So February 7th, 2001, that was National Signing Day of that year. So first of all, McQuarrie likely would have connected those two things together and would have known the date right off the bat, being a graduate assistant, and he would have still been incredibly busy, not bored, as he said, and not having anything to do and just going to drop some shoes off in the locker room, which is what he said.
Just to clarify, what do you mean by signing day? Like, the signing the new players, or was it?
Yeah. So
the draft kind of thing.
No, the National Signing Day typically used to be the first, I guess, Wednesday or something in February. Now they've moved it back into December. There's an early signing day, which is now when everyone signs. But they still do have like a de facto final signing period that first Wednesday of, and that's signing to sign to play for the college. So okay. Yeah, it's not for the draft.
Right. So John Ziegler was one of the catalysts that actually catapulted you into this investigative reporting that you're doing on your podcast. And just for the benefit of our viewers, that John Ziegler thought that just like you, just like me, just like everybody else, thought that Jerry Sandusky was guilty of all things that charged for. And it's interesting, his turnout. I have not listened to any of his podcasts because that's what I'm going to go back and do, because like I said, we're just going to scratch the surface on this issue today. I'm excited about having you back and having to do this. But tell me a little bit about John Ziegler's demeanor and when you first started talking to him and how that came about, where he flipped his belief.
I'll come back to Ziegler, but I'm still not finished on the date yet, because the correct date that Ziegler figured out, and I won't go into all the reasons why, but it was actually December 29th, 2000. And that checks out with Jerry Sandusky's schedule. It checks out with Aaron Fisher, who was a 13-year-old boy who was working out with him in the Penn State locker room that day. And the very important takeaway from this is the meeting with Paterno was February 9th, 2001. This shower incident where the prosecution says McQuarrie witnessed a rape happened December 29th, 2000. So you're talking about 6 weeks, roughly, 6 weeks passing before McQuarrie thought to go and talk to Joe Paterno about the shower incident, which, of course, during McQuarrie's testimony, he says he went the next day, which is a lie. McQuarrie has a history of, during his time playing for Penn State, of betting on games that he was playing in. He has a history of sending pictures of his penis to women who are not his wife. This is a guy that is not a good person. And maybe some of those things were brought forward when the police went to him to ask him about this. But the crazy thing about this, so McQuarrie waits until he waits 6 weeks to go talk to Paterno. Conveniently, that week prior to that, the wide receiver job had just come open at Penn State. Mike McQuarrie is a graduate assistant, former quarterback at Penn State. He thinks he's really, obviously deserves to get this wide receiver job. Kenny Jackson had just left and gone to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So McQuarrie goes to talk to Paterno. Sue Paterno has told John Ziegler that McQuarrie wasn't there for more than like 5 minutes. It was a very, very quick conversation. And McQuarrie likely was going there primarily just to get some FaceTime with Joe to ask about getting this wide receiver job. And also saying, hey, Joe, I saw Jerry in the locker room. I don't like him bringing, these boys in the locker room. It makes me uncomfortable. Which then Paterno took to superiors, and they did get Sandusky barred from the locker room. But I think the key takeaway is McQuarrie didn't get that wide receiver job then. And for this to be like a massive cover-up, you would think that people who were part of the cover-up would get something in return. But it's just crazy that the prosecution's key witness got the month, day, and year wrong of the main eyewitness account in the grand jury testimony. And on top of that, this was the only charge brought against Jerry Sandusky where there was not a conviction at trial either. And I said earlier, there was a federal investigation that showed that nothing happened here with this incident.
Yeah. Just interesting on that timeline, and that's kind of what, when you first started talking about this after you got together with John Ziegler, that's what struck me the most, because timelines are important, evidence is important, and intent is important, and I just think that a lot of things just got not missed, but I think, like you said, Jerry Sandusky's lawyer, who wasn't prepared for any type of trial like this, probably just didn't know. It was kind of like what's that one Joe Pesci movie, where he's trying to defend his nephews over a murder. I can't remember the name of
My Cousin Vinny. My Cousin
Vinny. So maybe it was that kind of incident, but those timelines and everything, those are absolutely crucial in these things. But going back to my question before, and when you got together with John Ziegler, like I said before, he was like you, he was like me, he was like a lot of people who had listened to all this testimony that Jerry Sandusky was guilty and justice was served and things like that. What actually changed Mr. Ziegler's mind, and did he subsequently change your mind at that time?
Yeah, well, I think Ziegler, Ziegler's a guy who graduated from Georgetown, doesn't have a connection to Penn State, although he did work in some of the local media markets in Ohio and West Virginia when he was a young sports reporter. But I think from Ziegler's perspective, and I don't want to speak for him, but he looked at the case, and it just didn't make any sense to him. Why would a legendary coach cover up for the crimes of an assistant coach? It just didn't check out. And when you start to look more into the accusers here, and you look at there were 7 accusers. No, maybe it was 6 accusers that testified at trial, because victim number 2 of the shower incident, at the trial, they said he's only known to God who he is, which was not true. They were hiding him because they didn't want him to testify, because they didn't know what he was going to say. And then there was another victim who was just a ghost victim, that a janitor allegedly had said something about seeing something, but that janitor since had dementia. So secondhand, it was another janitor giving the testimony of this janitor that had dementia. Just a ridiculous farce there. But Ziegler has and I still listen to John Ziegler's podcast regularly. He's very, he's not necessarily aligned 100% with the way that, we would think maybe from a libertarian freedom perspective. He does call himself a libertarian conservative, but he has a very good pulse for the media. and when the media is committing malpractice. And I think he sensed that immediately. He sensed that something was off here. And his angle at the beginning was, this doesn't make any sense that Joe Paterno would have any involvement in covering anything up here. And the thing about Ziegler, you asked about his demeanor, he can get extremely aggressive, and he can get very angry with you. But especially with regards to this case, I understand it, because he's been, lied to and had people disappoint him in many different ways with regards to this case. People say, people very close to some of these accusers who say that they're going to come forward and do an interview with him, then at the last minute they drop off the face of the earth. So he's dealt with a lot. And I think at this point in time, he will still provide some updates to the case here and there. But I think I do agree with him on this. I don't think Jerry Sandusky is ever going to be vindicated. The only chance that Sandusky has to be vindicated would be if this went to the federal level. There's no way a Pennsylvania judge is ever going to admit that Pennsylvania got this case this wrong. There's just too much invested in it. There's too much invested in it from the judicial system in Pennsylvania. There's too much invested in it from Penn State University, where they've paid hundreds of millions of dollars out to different accusers. So.
What do you think? In your opinion, do you think this was it? Because it's almost getting to sound like it was a Salem witch trial moment.
Yeah.
Where there was a spark that set something off, and with no real nothing to really back it up. And this is my question again. This is always the why and how did it all get started? So, if it was, if this is all true, this is one of the biggest injustices we've seen on a national scale in a long time. So I'm with you. I mean, this is one of those ones that it's going to be hard to overturn, because it seems like once you're tainted with this allegation, whether you were completely innocent or not of it, you're always tainted with it. So what are the next steps?
Yeah, I don't know what the next steps are. Frank Parlato, as Bruce mentioned at the beginning, he's trying to make Jerry Sandusky's innocence go viral. And I mean, there's some things I agree with what he's doing. There's some things that I disagree with. One thing that I did like to a degree. So years ago, there was supposed to be a story that was going to be published in Newsweek by John Ziegler and Ralph Cipriano. That really broke this case wide open. And a part of that Newsweek article was going to be a release of Jerry Sandusky's medical records. And within Jerry Sandusky's medical records, it reveals that he suffers from hypogonadism, which is a condition in which the body does not produce enough testosterone. And he has another condition of atrophied testicles, which essentially means he really doesn't have testicles.
Right.
So from a medical standpoint, you could bring doctors in to testify if you had time and you weren't pressured in 7 months to say that these crimes aren't even possible. This man couldn't even get an erection, and you're bringing these accusers forward saying that he was making them give him oral sex many multiple times. Some of these testimonies are just crazy with that. But I think the crazy part about this is if somehow he still was able to sexually abuse these and they weren't kids, all these abusers, the ages at the time the abuse would have occurred would have been in the teenage years. So I think the media paints it as like, not that it's like any better, but I think it is important just to understand it from this perspective. The media paints it as like an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old boy getting abused, when in reality, the accusers are saying they were abused when they were like 13, 14, 15, and all of these accusers are all heterosexual males. So it really doesn't quite add up how an elderly man would have been abusing them with no testosterone. And if he somehow had abused them, you'll think they would have pointed out in their testimony well, we know we can prove that it was Jerry Sandusky because I know that he has no testicles. That would have been the mic drop. That would have been, I mean, that would have come out.
Yeah. What was the former president of Penn State, Graham Spanier's attitude during this and before he came out with his book, The Lion's Den? I don't know how much you know about it. I just came across it in a couple of actual searches that I got into. But how much do you know about Graham Spanier and his involvement in all of this?
Yeah, I interviewed Graham maybe 2 years ago. So Graham, at the time that in November 2011, when the shit hit the fan, he stood up for. So it was Joe Paterno was not implicated in doing anything wrong in November 2011. It was Jerry Sandusky and it was Tim Curley, the athletic director, and Gary Schultz, who was, I guess, the head of the Department of Finance or something like that. But somehow in his role, he was like the head of the campus police. I forget how that lined up. It's been a while since I've really looked at that. But it was those three. And Graham Spanier was not implicated in doing anything wrong in November 2011. So Graham Spanier released a statement standing by his guys and saying, these are, long-standing Penn State employees. Their reputation is impeccable. There's no way that that they would have done this, and that resulted in the board of trustees removing Graham Spanier from being president of Penn State University. And the thing about Graham Spanier is he's as much the opposite of Joe Paterno that you could probably be, but yet the two of them were pretty good friends. Maybe not good friends. They at least were friendly to each other. Probably, I don't know if Joe Paterno was really friends with that many people. But Spanier, total opposite from Paterno. He was a big-time liberal. So this is another political angle. So you have Graham Spanier, president of Penn State University, liberal, Tom Corbett, governor of Pennsylvania, serving on the Penn State Board of Trustees with a decisive vote as a Republican. During the time leading up to 2011, there was a lot of butting of heads as the Republicans were cutting the university funding for state institutions. So that relationship was not friendly between Corbett and Spanier. Spanier eventually does get charged with a misdemeanor for endangering the welfare of a child. And I don't remember the whole cycle of the court appearances, but it was, I think it was dismissed and then it was brought again. And there was something weird with the charge where that charge didn't even exist at the time this would have occurred in 2001. But they were still going to charge him with it retroactively. And then Spanier did stick to his guns, and he was not going to strike a plea deal. But the prosecution was not going to let him walk without getting their ounce of blood. Right. And he was convicted on the misdemeanor. And this is where Governor Shapiro comes in. This was Shapiro, 4 or 5 years ago, before he was governor. He was attorney general. He thought it would look good for his political career to come down hard against anyone involved in this scandal, and he was instrumental in Graham Spanier being sentenced to a prison term for a misdemeanor, first-time offender, which is insanity if you know anything about how this typically works. And he served a little bit of time, but the crazy thing is Spanier is such like a nice guy, and he's such a devout liberal that he even voted for Shapiro when he was elected governor this past election cycle, which is just crazy. But
you interviewed Mark Pendergrass back in Felony Friday number 47, and they rejected a therapy technique that was used on Sandusky's alleged victims, was a repressed memory therapy, which has since been debunked. Can you kind of enlighten us a little bit on that?
Yeah, repressed memory theory is not supposed to be, acceptable in the court of law. It's not supposed to be able to be used in testimony. That alone should be enough to demand a retrial, and have these that alone. And I think that is the tactic Sandusky is taking now. To on his latest appeal. I honestly don't think it'll work because it's still Pennsylvania. But repressed memory theory, and this is exactly what happened with the fake accuser, A.J. Dillon, when he went to Andrew Shubin. So that's another crazy element of this case. There's really only two lawyers, two different law firms, who are funneling all of these accusers through the system to Penn State. And Penn State would only talk to an accuser if they went to one of these two law firms, if they came through one of these two law firms. It's just so political in nature, and it's not political in left-right. It's political in just corruption, which that's Pennsylvania politics for you. But essentially what would happen is, and this is after the trial. So this is when the money bags are open. Penn State, the New York Times wrote an article even before the trial saying that Penn State will easily, have to give accusers $100 million from this case. So that opened up the floodgates. You have people coming from, everywhere. And the only thing they really had to do was either have a connection to Joe Paterno somehow. So it had to be a connection either to Sandusky that somehow involved Paterno, or it had to be a connection to Sandusky that somehow involved the Second Mile, which was Sandusky's charity for troubled youths. That's where he met all of these troubled youths who ended up sending him to prison. So that was the only two requirements. And what they would do, what a lawyer like Andrew Shubin would do, would be like, okay, well, that your story sounds believable. I'm going to set you up with a therapist to talk to a therapist. They would go talk to a therapist, and the therapist would then bring out more memories, bring out more abuse. They'll remember more things that happened. And this also did happen with the trial accusers as well. Using this repressed memory theory, and it was permitted as testimony in court, which is ridiculous. There's no evidence of any of these kids at the time of the abuse telling anyone they were being abused, and there's no evidence even during the trial that they were telling anyone that they were one of the Sandusky accusers. These guys all had it was all completely anonymous, because if people had realized who the individuals were who were bringing these accusations against Jerry Sandusky, people in that local Central PA community would have realized these guys are all liars. These guys are all people who have who've stolen before, who have broken the law, who've done different things. And the crazy thing is, so when the grand jury report was initially not the initial leak, so the leak of the report, but when it was leaked out that Jerry Sandusky was being investigated by a grand jury, there were actually 3 grand juries. It wasn't until the third one that they were actually able to produce a report and charge him. After the first one, they only had one accuser, Aaron Fisher, who is victim 1. And they enlisted the help of a local recent graduate from Penn State University, Sarah Ganem, to help to drum up some other accusers. They figured there has to be more out there if this is true. So Sarah Ganem, I guess, looked at Jerry Sandusky's book that he wrote, which had a picture with 4 kids on it. And it just so happened that the 4 kids he's pictured with on his book in a picture end up being 4 of the people who are the ones who bring charges forward. And she essentially went to their door and said, "Do you know that this is happening?" Did Jerry Sandusky abuse you? You should reach out to the police. Went to the police. The police went back to them. And every single one of those accusers, the first time the police went to them and said, did Jerry Sandusky abuse you? Every single one of them said no. It was through coaching. There was one call, I forget which accuser, where there was a interview happening, 2 police officers and one of the accusers, and the accuser's like, I gotta take a break, I gotta smoke a cigarette or something. He gets up and leaves, and there's a recorded conversation of the 2 police officers saying, how can we get this guy to say that Jerry Sandusky abused him? We should tell him that there were other kids abused. We should tell him that other kids he knows were abused. Like literally figuring out how to, it's just crazy. Like all the different angles to this.
Rolling this into the present, your last podcast about the Sandusky debacle that we have here was on April 28th on your Finding Freedom podcast. And you interviewed A.J. Dillon, who was actually a fake accuser, went in as a fake accuser, kind of like a Project Veritas thing to see what he can do and get into the actual reason of why everybody was kind of a cash grabbing this whole thing on the backside. So can we just scratch on the surface before we end the show, and you can tell us a little bit about that, because like I said, we just scratched the surface of this whole thing tonight. And I want to bring you back and discuss more about this case as it goes forward, because it's all over. But I mean, still, the interesting fact is that it still goes on, and we're still doing podcasts and interviews about it. And it's interesting what A.J. Dillon did.
Yeah, A.J. Dillon is an interesting character. He's just a guy that, saw what he thinks is an injustice. And I agree with him. It is, that Jerry Sandusky being in prison. And he wanted to expose what was happening and how easy it was to become an accuser. And he essentially went through the steps that I just explained. He went and he talked to Andrew Shubin. He had this different scenario. And I don't remember exactly. It's been a little while since that interview, but he had this, the scenario of how Sandusky abused him that he told Shubin. Shubin paid him to go to therapy. It was some crazy amount of time.
3 years. He said 3 years. Yeah,
yeah, 3 years going to therapy. And I think they would also have like group sessions too with the other accusers there. And when this was happening, I remember Ziegler talking about it, talking about their potentially being a fake accuser, and A.J. Dillon and Ziegler, they did not get along, because Ziegler would, try to talk to, A.J. Dillon and, have him, maybe be a little more tactful in the way that he's doing things. And A.J. Dillon just kind of did whatever he wanted to. He's kind of a wild card. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think he definitely did a service. I think that probably if he would have taken some of Ziegler's advice, maybe, this court could have blown up and been used, more of a way to get more sunlight on this case. But it's just wild. I mean, A.J. Dillon's from Central PA. I don't remember if he knows any of these accusers personally, but he knows enough about the area. He knows enough about, and if you know anything about Pennsylvania, you have Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Eastern Pennsylvania. In the middle of it is Kentucky. So I don't think I'm going to offend anyone by saying there's a lot of white trash in Central PA.
Yeah.
There's a lot of poor white people in Central PA. It's just the way it is. Yeah. And I mean, that's why Jerry Sandusky founded the Second Mount, was to help, these poor white kids, a lot of them who didn't have a father figure. Yeah. And, that's what ended up putting him in prison.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to leave it up to panel to ask their final questions before we wrap this episode up and schedule you for another one to go ahead and do that. But I'll leave it up to Ken and Jason if they want to chime in. Harkos is in the background. He's in the green room. If he wants to come in and ask a question, he can do the same thing. But go ahead, Ken.
Just listen to that podcast that you did with with AJ Dillon, like I said, it opened my eyes a little bit to at least question what was going on. And I look at it in this way: if the person is really guilty, he's sitting in jail, so justice was served. If he's not, then then something has to be done. But it makes a lot more sense to me. I can see how it wouldn't be necessarily a conspiracy rather than a almost a comedy of errors, and people just CYA. They're just covering their ass, and they don't want to get in trouble, and we'll just let it go, and it'll go. The guy's in jail. Okay, this is solved. And I think that sounds like maybe that's what's happening here.
Jason, you got anything to add?
No, actually, I don't. Of course, I don't. You give me the floor, and I've got nothing to say.
Well, here comes the madman who is never at a loss for words. But Harco, you came a little late, but we've had a complete interview with John, and we're really thanking him for being here and just scratching the surface on all this. We're welcome for your comments or your question right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been sitting here for a few listening and stuff while I was eating and stuff. I just got home late. Jason, you sure there's nothing that you want to say? You don't want to ask anything? Because, you cry yourself to sleep every night that we don't give you an opportunity to talk. Now you got an opportunity to talk. You're passing up.
Nothing to say about this topic right now.
Okay. Well, I do have a question. Who is Jerry Sandusky, and what have we been talking about for this episode?
He's the president of TWA Airlines, and there was
TWA.
There was a conspiracy
airlines
that
fuck everybody.
There was something about short skirts and the stewardesses. It was a mess. It was a mess.
Hey, short skirts save lives. Okay.
Yeah, and that's why Harkos kind of bowed out of this one, because he really just didn't know anything. He's not a sporto, so that's where he's at. But John, go ahead and plug everything that you got going on, especially your Finding Freedom podcast, your new podcast, which is Pursuit of Freedom, and just go ahead and give everybody. We're going to put the show notes of everything that we have right now on our show notes for the page. So it's not on there right now, but it will be on there post-production. But just give us a shout out, and give yourself a shout out, and let everybody know what you're about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bruce. So with regards to this case, you can find a list of every interview I've done by going to lionsofliberty.com/Sandusky-scandal. And you can go through, like I talked about at the beginning of this show, you can go through and see, where I was, that first interview I did with John Ziegler, what my mindset was and how that kind of evolved over time, the more I learned about this case. As Bruce said, I did start a new, podcast series is what the kids would call it, called Pursuit of Freedom. That's on my Finding Freedom feed, where I am documenting my move from, my move out of corporate America. I'm officially out. I'm out now, so it's not the move out. It's the move from being out of corporate America to becoming a full-time entrepreneur. All the wins, losses, and I'm going to try to take the audience along for the ride, trying to build a community of other people who are either trying to do the same thing, have already done the same thing. Maybe we can learn from each other. Maybe we can collaborate on different things. So you can listen to that on my Finding Freedom with John Odermatt podcast feed. You can get all of the Lions of Liberty podcast episodes, including Finding Freedom. You can't get Pursuit of Freedom on Lions of Liberty, but you can get all my shows and Brian McWilliams' shows on the Lions of Liberty Network podcast feed. So that's what I got going on. I'm
going to have to fucking join that network thing, though, man, because technically, I am entrepreneur, unemployed, I'm unemployed because I'm self-employed type of thing. So I want to definitely hop into that.
Yeah. Well, John's going to stick around for another hour or so to do another episode so we can post one next week. And thank you, John, for being here. Thank for the panel for all their interest and understanding under this. They were pretty surprised when I wanted to do this subject, but I think everybody has calmed down now, and we were able to get this interview through. And I really appreciate everybody being here out there on the live stream right now. You can grab us on your favorite podcatcher tomorrow morning to listen to this podcast. Also, we have an X Spaces podcast that we do 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. called The Weathered View. And we will see you next time that we come together here on.
And we're doing bonus content right after this, but it's going to be released next Sunday. So make sure you subscribe and all that shit.
There we go. Okay.
I'm actually going to find out what the hell we've been talking about. So
there we go. Have a great day, guys, man, and be good to yourselves. We'll see you later.